Great businesses are built by great people. Thanks for joining us on the More People podcast. Andrew Fitzmaurice, joined today by Mark Kitson. We'll go through some of Mark's background. I'm keen to ask you some pointy questions, Mark, and get your insights on lots of interesting topics. But you're one of us. You're an ex-food person primarily, a career at Whitbread, Costa for a long time before going into managing consultancy. Is that the right way to sum it up?
It's a fair summary, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So what brings you here today? What's keeping you up at night? What are you spending most of your time on at the moment?
Two things mainly, people in conflict and people needing new strategies, so change management, that type of thing.
And is that sector specific or is that agnostic as far as clients are concerned?
It's agnostic. I mean, everybody is, they go in combination, don't they? Conflict and change management. And I'm seeing it in all sectors at the moment. So whether it's driven by AI or it's driven by financial pressures, everybody is trying to re-strategize and then take their teams on that journey. And sometimes they're having good quality conversations about that, and sometimes they're not being very clear, and then they're falling out a bit. And that's a lot of the work that I do.
So are you better informed in helping these businesses, having worked within one of those organizations yourself, as opposed to being a career management consultant? Does that help?
Yes, yeah. One of the questions you sent to me beforehand was, do you need to have failed or to have struggled before to have learnt something to have grown? And the answer is absolutely yes. So my career started in 1995. I did some graduate placement at First Choice Holidays, and then I worked for a few years in the rail industry where it was just post privatisation, so an exciting place to work, and then moved into Whitbread, did pubs for 2 years, so drink and food. And then moved into Costa for 8 years. And I think having been through those experiences of the ups and downs of trying to trade a business, trying to get revenue in, having things work, sometimes for a long time, but eventually needing to change and kind of, in essence, they break and they don't work anymore, then that's when you end up in those turnaround and those crisis moments. And I think the crisis and the turnaround moments in my career have been the most informative for what I then bring to my clients, because I'm walking into situations where they feel that it's a catastrophe and everything's broken. And actually I look around and I think, well, yeah, I've been here and I know that's really painful and I know it's really difficult, but I can also tell you there's life after this, and these are the steps we can take to walk through it in effect and kind of come through that.
What specific examples spring to mind that are ingrained in your psyche that were particularly informative?
Well, I was a director on Costa Coffee's business in Russia for a number of years, and we had a model that worked at first, and then we were trying to expand the model and grow it, and we were finding that as the expansion took on, those new sites weren't working. And being the person who was closest to it, I could see that starting to go wrong before anybody else. And so my experience there was I was the first person to share the bad news with my managing director and say, the way this is going is we're going to lose a lot of money. We're going to have to do something, which makes you immediately very unpopular. And then I was also the person that then led through that to work out, well, what are the solutions to that? Kind of how do we close some of this business? How do we trade it better? And then eventually what we did was actually sell it back to our Russian partner.
Do you remember the emotions and the feelings and the stresses from that chapter? And how differently do you think you'd approach those now with this extra grey hair and wisdom?
Yeah, the emotions would be something like fear and isolation, because I think when you're a success in business, everybody looks to you and they're excited about it, and and what you say is responded to very positively. And when you don't get those responses anymore, but people look away and you lose the eye contact with people, and they don't want to be available to meet you, it's incredibly isolating. I suppose what we do now is we try to help people to have better conversations, because nobody wants to talk about painful things. And in fact, we're all wired as human beings to find easier things, to find sweeter tasting food, to find easier ways to get fit, all those things that we do that take less effort, that take less pain. But actually, sometimes the painful conversation is the thing that then unlocks the longer term benefit. And it's not, those conversations are normally much easier than people fear they're going to be. So having conversations earlier is what I learned about, and it's what we help people do.
So you're working with us at the moment, alongside Sean Sankey, with some of our clients on board alignment and change and succession and overcoming some of those difficult scenarios. One of the phrases that I hear Sean in particular use a lot is this idea of getting all the problems on the table. Is that the rhetoric that works as far as getting people to have better conversations, to air everything without fear. Is that the right way of thinking about it?
Yeah, I think so. And there's different techniques we use around that. We try to objectify and explain situations to clients. So I think when people arrive in in a problem situation, they feel personally responsible. If they feel a sense of failure and shame, and they don't want to talk about things. And what we help them to do is to describe that situation and then describe to them some of the events that have actually led to that taking place. So we will describe how the context has changed, how the market has changed, how they've got other competitors, how their prices have increased, those types of things. And they have a slow realization where they think, this is something that is happening rather than something I've done. And then that starts to be something you can untangle. So it's no longer a conversation about, are you a good employee? Are you working hard enough or anything like that? But it becomes a conversation about, here is a problem we can solve together. And that completely kind of reframes not only your ability to talk about it, but actually the amount of people that will join in the conversation.
How conscious do you have to be, or how easily can you manage different personality profiles and different preferences and the different speeds at which people go through emotional change curves?
Yeah, I think that's when we're all different. And some of us love change and find it very exciting, and other people find it takes a lot longer for them to emotionally and mentally process change and to come to terms with it and then sort of find answers and solutions to it. So some of the work we do is in the room where we can signpost that. So it's much easier if we've done some type of personality profiling beforehand, because we have a language or a vocabulary with which we can describe somebody's ability to say, you're really quick on this, that's good, that's leading the conversation, but can we hold back and pause and make sure we just spend a little bit more time on this to process it for others? So sometimes we do it in the room. Often we do it one-to-one in coaching sessions, because then it's private and it allows people to pause and reflect without fear and without risk, because of course doing it in public it's riskier than doing it in private, isn't it?
Have you always been an advocate of coaching and having a coach, or is that something that you've learned and come to later?
It's something I've come to during my career, and I remember times at Whitbread there was one manager I had in particular who was willing to sit down and share with me the unvarnished truth about the good things I did and then the bad things I did or didn't do, and that unlocked my career for me, because somebody was willing to do that in a low risk situation and speak into kind of where I was. And so I'm an enormous advocate for coaching now, and actually more and more what I'm finding is it's far less about me bringing any wisdom and far more about somebody having some dedicated space to actually process their thoughts, speak them out loud and make sense of their world themselves, basically.
If you were giving advice to 25 to 35-year-olds who perhaps haven't yet got to that eureka moment or haven't had the opportunity to find a coach or be coached, how would you recommend someone goes about that process of finding one or considering what they need?
Well, there's always the opportunity to go and buy in coaching or counselling or whatever it might be. I think when you're earlier in your career, you don't necessarily have the resources or the contacts to do that. I think what you can do is you can find somebody who is a stage on from you in your career. And they might be in your business at the moment. They might be, a trusted, sort of slightly elder, somebody who's 3 years, 5 years ahead of you, or it might be somebody in your friend's business, where they work. So just a friend of a friend who is somebody who's perhaps got, an hour once a month to have a chat, and just focus on you and allow you to focus on you for a little bit.
I've always enjoyed the fact that we've got a big range of people here. There's 40 odd employees, and there's people who've been here for a month, 6 months, a year, 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. There's always someone here who is a step or two ahead. And I think people are quite giving with their time here. So if someone were to ask, I think they'd be pleasantly surprised that they'd get that support.
I think the thing that people don't realise is when you coach other people, you're learning as you're coaching someone else. So it's making you think strategically about the questions you asked somebody else. And you very often walk out the room and think, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that applies to me. So when you're coaching others, you're growing yourself. It's not one-way traffic.
Do you have a massive library in your head, or what are some of the best coaching questions generically that you found to be effective?
I do not have a specific library. I think what I concentrate on is being with somebody one-to-one and being present. And I think we're generally not very good at being present because our phone's buzzing in our pockets and we try to be elsewhere. And I think when you've got two human beings that are present with each other, the conversation just naturally unlocks, because that natural curiosity that you have about someone, about, well, why did you do that? And did that have an impact on other people? And, would you do that again? Or if you had your time again, would you have done that differently? I think those questions, just through curiosity and through being interested in people, is kind of what leaves me with questioning, to be honest.
I'm a big fan. I don't always practice what I preach, but I'm a big fan of the Stephen Covey, listen with the intent to understand, not listening with the intent to reply, which is incredibly difficult to do within a podcast setting. There's one example, because there's an element of wanting to be in the moment, just listening to what's being said, and there's a need to respond with another question in 2 seconds. So you're always thinking one step ahead rather than being present. What advice do you have for someone trying to be present and in the moment, as opposed to itching to offer the advice or itching to ask the next question?
Well, there's that famous quote, isn't there, which is, people don't listen, they're just waiting for their turn to talk. And I think that's really cynical, because I think we're better than that as human beings. But I do think it's when you're racking up the things to reply with, I think it's just having that self-check to say, actually, I'm not here for me. This is not about me having answers. This is about somebody finding their own answers. Because ultimately, as human beings, we've all got to find our own answers in our careers and in our relationships and our friendships and everything. So it's just having that self-check to stop and just say, okay, what's going on here? And also sometimes just not be afraid of silence, because what we tend to do, and on podcasts, of course, you want to fill the airspace because gaps in the airtime are really awkward. But in human conversations, it's okay to pause for 5 seconds or 10 seconds in between asking questions and just think, I wonder where that takes us. I wonder if somebody's got more to say. I wonder if there's more about to come. We're not very good at that because we're so anxious to keep going and filling the space.
Do you have to try and work out what people need? Because in my experience, people bring problems, whether it's a coaching scenario or an everyday work scenario, and you're trying to work out, or in your personal life, but you're trying to work out, do you want a hug? Do you want to be listened to, or do you want a solution? Which one is it? Because the responses are quite different. Do you get better with practice at understanding innately which of those 3 things are required at given moments?
I think there's a difference with different types of coaching. I think some types of coaching, you're being entirely led by the individual, and you're saying, okay, where is it you want to go? What's your journey? What are you discovering? And I think when you're working as a third-party coach, like I do quite often, that's okay. That's more valued, because sometimes that answer with the person you're coaching is, well, actually, I want to leave this company. I want to get a different job, and that's fine. I think if you're coaching somebody who's in your company in the same business, often the coaching is not that person-centered. It's more about, okay, there's something we want to achieve. We would like to get you to promotion or to achieve a certain target or goal, in which case you've got to somehow balance these 2 things together of, okay, well, what am I hearing here about your abilities and your needs and your challenges that you've got, versus where do we want to steer you to? There's no right answer, and circumstances and context kind of like define how much you focus on the person, how much you focus on the goal, really. But I think as a person, unless you've got a goal, well, by definition, you go nowhere, aren't you? So you've always got to have a bit of both.
By definition, the people that you're working with already are high performers, or they're aspirational high performers by virtue of engaging with you in the first place. What behaviours and habits do you see that distinguish those high performers from the ones that don't become such?
I think there's 2 things. The first is focus. So high performers have focus. They know what they want to achieve and what the steps are to get themselves there. And the second is they have an ecosystem around them to support them. So all the high performers I know, they've got a way that they keep themselves healthy to the balance that's right for them. So there's the old phrase, isn't there, about work hard, play hard. And people who are high performers that I know, they tend to invest heavily in a range of other things. Now, depending on what that range is, it varies by person, but it might be personal fitness, it might be their marriage, it might be their kids, but they're full on in other places apart from their work. And to me, it seems to give them the right balance so that they can kind of focus very intensively on work-based tasks, but also switch off and refresh their brain doing something else. So it's that ability to switch between 2 at a similar intensity that I think high performance people do.
Hey, look, we could talk all day. There's millions of questions, and I could definitely milk all of your experience and more answers, but Mark, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you too. Thank you, Andrew.